Hello, my name is Per-Olof, and today I will talk about the development in the SRHR area, past, present and future issues. Global policy formulation and implementation mirrors the perceived current global challenges, and this is very true in the area of SRHR. In the 1960s, the perceived problem was the so-called uncontrolled population growth, and the policy response was something called population control. The first UN World Population Conference in Bucharest in 1974 clearly mirrored this view, held primarily by the high-income countries. This top-down approach, coupled with a lack of human rights awareness in many family planning programs, quickly turned into failure and a moral disaster, and the grassroots level of reaction was sometimes forceful. The policy community learned some of the lesson and launched a new generation of more rights-based policies. This time it became based on families' voluntary decision on how to plan their reproduction. The second UN World Population Conference in Mexico City in 1984 endorsed this view. However, at this meeting the issue about women's right to abortion also emerged as a main controversy. And this fueled the emerging global women's rights movement by focusing women's rights to decide over their own bodies. And the third UN conference on SRHR was named the International Conference on Population and Development and was held in Cairo. Here an attempt was made to make progress by focusing on the concept of sexual and reproductive rights as the overarching principles. The new policy that was adopted emphasized reproductive health and the empowerment of women. But despite this reframing of issues, no progress was made regarding the conflict over the abortion issue. This tended to block implementation of a complete rights-based approach. This was also the most probable reason why the 1994 UN Conference on Population and Development has not been followed by another similar UN conference until this date. But the SRHR issues found other platforms and new aspects entered the agenda, and the trend of regarding sex and sexuality as more than reproductive functions grew stronger. This opened up the gate for embracing issues of sexual orientation and identity into the scope of SRHR policy formulation, and this in turn strengthened the human rights basis. But it also further widened the split between countries and communities who have different interpretations of gender equity and LGBTQ rights. The divide seems to be between a secular interpretation of human rights and an interpretation towards a background of religious faith. The conflict seems to be less between different religions, but rather between different degrees of orthodoxy within each religion. With the growing tendency of religious orthodoxy in many parts of the world, this has posed a difficult dilemma. In fact, it has made global agreement on many classic SRHR issues impossible. A strong convictions of universal human rights seem difficult to reconcile with the equally strong conviction that basic values should be based on religious dogmas, since both positions claim that their view is non-negotiable. Therefore, the latest development in policy formulation might offer a new angle on the SRHR area, which is to make the issue of a global sustainable development the starting point of all policy development. Accepting the overwhelming evidence that we are not in a sustainable path regarding climate change, and that this poses a threat to survival of mankind in a few generations, might be easier regardless of religious conviction. It is already very clear that failing to cope with the sustainability issue will hit the most vulnerable groups and individuals the hardest, that is, women and children in poor communities. This immediately links the sustainability-based policy movements to the SRHR issues. The Millennium Development Goals were formulated by the UN system for the period between 1990 to 2015. They have been very easy to understand in all contexts and extremely useful for evaluating progress in the SRHR area. They were straightforward and clearly quantify the goal and the time span allowed for fulfilling the goal. Especially the goals for maternal health and gender equity have been extremely important for SRHR. When setting new goals for the future, it is important to link all the specific issues, including SRHR, to the overarching issue of a global sustainable development. It is a challenge to accomplish both straightforwardness and vision with only a few goals, and it has been suggested that the connection with the Sustainable Development Agenda requires a dashboard of indicators rather than one or a few goals. This seems necessary to repeat the success with the Millennium Development Goals and still being able to support the very important link to a sustainable global development. Both measuring sticks and a compass are needed for the future development of SRHR policy formulation, implementation and evaluation.